Good morning, everyone. We will be getting started in just a moment. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, good morning. This is Tracy Lustyan with AlliantGroup. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you, Tracy.
Excellent.
Hi.
Terrific. Well, Sandia, thank you so much for coordinating, and I'm excited to speak with all of your attendees this morning. I think we'll jump right into the R&D tax credit, and one of the things that I've loved about working with FPE is, we've been working with you for a number of years to be able to take advantage of the R&D tax credit, and it's wonderful of you all to want to share your success and experience with the R&D credit with your entire supply chain. So we're excited to be here this morning, virtually meeting with all of you. Let me see if I can. So just a brief background on AlliantGroup. We're going to spend about 20 minutes or so on the R&D tax credit. I'm going to move through quite a bit of information very, very quickly. So I know that Sandia is going to be monitoring the chat box, and we will all be looking at it so we can make sure to get all of your questions answered. Very briefly about AlliantGroup, we do not perform any compliance or attest functions that your CPA performs. We're specialists in the R&D tax credit. And so, this is all we do. We work with over 4,000 CPA firms across the U.S. And so, we're thought leaders in the R&D tax credit. And as you can see, in working jointly with different associations and CPA firms, we've helped U.S. businesses get back almost $10 billion in credits and incentives. And certainly we understand what tough times there are with the unprecedented, health and economic uncertainty that we're all facing. And so just within, by 7/15, we had delivered over $750 million to U.S. businesses to help them keep their doors open. Naturally, these credits, unlike PPP, are yours. They come in the form of tax refunds and reducing your tax in your current year. And so they're cash in your pocket. You don't ever have to pay back like you potentially might have to with PPP. These are your funds to use to help you grow your business, to help you automate, to help you to continue to improve your manufacturing processes. Very briefly about our executive board, as you can see here, we have the folks that wrote the revised regulations. We'll give you just a brief background on the R&D credit. It's been around for 40 years, but in the early 2000s, Congress rewrote these regs to help keep and create technical jobs here in the U.S. So if you're watching this, this webinar, then you are a producer, a manufacturer, a systems integrator, an automation expert, and therefore you're a bullseye for this credit. With the regs that were rewritten in the early 2000s with Dean Zerbe, Don Levy, they were the Senate Finance Committee and rewrote all of this legislation. And then of course we have 3 former IRS commissioners on our staff to help with our quality control. And these were the folks that had to enforce the legislation as it was written. So very, very briefly, our model is, and especially companies like FPE love this because it gives you the best return on your investment. We marry industry experts. So we're 1,000 professionals, 700 are dedicated to R&D. Within our manufacturing, systems integration, and automation practice, we have nearly 70 engineers, programmers, process engineers that work with companies like yours. They marry the work that you do every day with what the law says, the legislation, with what the IRS wants in terms of documentation. and we stand behind our work 100%. So you can see what this does for companies like yours is that it, one, gets you everything you're entitled to under the letter of the law. And number two, it takes very, very little of your time. We know what we're looking for. We know how to document it. We know how to identify it. We've done this more than 50,000 times. So we're really the thought leaders in this space. For those of you that are on this call that may already be claiming, whether you're a custom manufacturer, a food processor, a systems integrator, control and automation company, if you're already claiming the credit, as long as you're on this webinar and you reference this webinar, we'll give you a completely gratis assessment. Are you getting everything you're entitled to? We have hundreds of examples like this, but we pulled this one, a custom manufacturer. You can see, about a $24 million company, they were taking a $72,000 credit. We increased their credit to almost a little bit over $500,000. And this is not an unusual example. The reason, again, is that model. We roll up our sleeves, we know what we're looking for, and we know how to capture the credits that you're entitled to along your continuum, everything from estimating, designing, initially, even if you're not awarded the contract, all the way through the production of a first article when you're through the testing, commissioning, or you have a first article that you're ready to sell to your client. We can capture wages, supply costs, and contract expenses. So this is not at all unusual for us to find, sometimes it's not 600%. It could be 2, 3, 4, 8 times what you're already claiming. It just depends upon the quality of the work that's been being performed for you. So just to give you some backdrop to the R&D tax credit, this is what keeps me up at night. I love what I do because, and I'm really, really grateful to FPE, to Sandia and their team at FPE, because this is the biggest problem that small US businesses have, is that they either don't know that they qualify and they self-censor because the name R&D might indicate that you need patents or inventions, which I hear a lot still even today, or they're not, they're either self-censoring or they're just not aware of it. So we really appreciate FPE making this awareness available to their entire supply chain. 85% of this credit is still going to companies over $250 million in gross revenue, which means that we have a lot of work to do to get the word out to those companies that need the credit more than anyone. And we're going to be going through, there have been expansions and enhancements to the credit that make this more valuable and more accessible to small business than ever before. And even with all of those changes in the past 5 years, there's still, this large disconnect between, who could have applicability to the credit. So I'm going to give you just a brief backdrop to this credit. I'll only spend like 30 seconds here. Credit's been around since 1980. It was put in place under the Reagan administration. We were in a world of hurt in the early 80s. If you remember the auto industry, many of you may not even remember this, but the auto industry was being sent, a lot of Japanese companies were just getting so much of that auto industry work, which we had been fat and happy with, for the first 50 years the auto industry was around. So Reagan and Congress changed this, or made this so that companies could take advantage and be more innovative in order to help them compete globally. Then we saw the same thing happen in the late 90s. In the late 90s, there was a tremendous offshoring of engineering jobs, manufacturing jobs, software technology jobs, all being offshored. With the internet, now you could access that intellectual capital offshore, and it was a third to a fifth of the price of what you would pay for a U.S. engineer or a U.S. software designer. And so with that, Congress again rewrote these regulations in the early 2000s and said it no longer needs to advance industry knowledge. It no longer needs to be new to the world of patent. It only needs to be new to you as a taxpayer. And so as you're developing new processes, new products, you're integrating new designs to meet a specific customer or client need, you now qualify for the credit in the same way that a competing company in a neighboring city or neighboring state qualify. So you qualify, your competitors qualify, because it only needs to be a new design to you or a new product to you. And therefore, you're applying your know-how and your knowledge to a specific set of criteria. So you can see what's required now is any new or improved product, process, software, technique or design, formulation, and invention. So anything that improves the overall reliability, quality, durability, functionality, performance of that system or of that product will qualify for the credit. So this is now about keeping and creating technical jobs. It's to help U.S. businesses be globally competitive, to give you more profit so that you can invest that profit into innovation, into new technology, into trying a new industry, into looking at new products that you can develop and produce. If you're a contract manufacturer or a job shop, again, very, very qualified for this credit because everything you do, you're applying your knowledge to a new product or a new formulation that your client wants, and you have to figure out how to not only make it work in a laboratory or in a small batch setting, but you have to be able to scale it up. So that entire process development that you're doing qualifies for the credit. So these are the three categories of expenses that are attributable to the credit. It's U.S. wages, U.S. supplies, and U.S. contract expense. So, these wages go into a bucket of expenses that in turn will generate your credit. And we've got some case studies and examples to show you about how powerful this incentive can be. And it's different as based on the industry that you're working in. But these are, if you're a manufacturer or you're a systems integrator. So, manufacturing, anything that you're doing, if you have a product line, any new or improved products that you're developing, and it can be version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2.0, it can be multiple versions of the same product that you are improving or you're changing to meet a specific client need. If you are a contract manufacturer, then everything you get in your front door is going to require an analysis on, even if they're giving you the design of what they want, what your client wants, you've got to develop the process to mass produce that at a certain price point, at a certain quality level, at a certain durability and reliability level. Therefore, that entire process development will qualify. If you're a systems integrator and you're incorporating robotics, pneumatics, hydraulics, and you are putting these together in order to make a system more functional or to create a whole system, whether it's conveyance systems, whether it's automating repetitive processes within a manufacturing plant, then that is an excellently qualified activity because you're designing and you're developing the integration of different hardware and software to create a complete new system. That's the integration part of it, and you have all the risk associated with whether that system is going to work, and then you naturally need to commission it either in your shop or at the client site or both to make sure that it's operational and meets all of the specifications. So excellent candidate for the credit. So these are typical activities that are qualified for the credit. And really, you know, it's that whole development process that you go through, whether it's a product development or a process development or a design development or the programming and then the testing of that programming to make sure that it meets all of the sequencing and functional requirements. It's that time. So it could be your wages from your estimators all the way through, you know, design, engineering, and production. You know, if you've got PPAPs or you've got specific quality standards in that process that you have to meet, all the way through to the development of a first article. So all the way through that production or that assembly, final programming. That's the time that we can capture for toward this credit. And so here's an example. This is a food equipment manufacturer. So they make food equipment for the food industry. You know, we work with whether it's food equipment manufacturers. We also have sanitary equipment manufacturers for the dairy and the food industry. But this is, you can see they got a significant credit here, over $1 million. And they're looking at that integration of all of these different hardware, software in order to create a complete solution for their client. They don't take on a ton of jobs a year. They do about 25 projects a year. And then you can see the qualified activities in those projects. One of the reasons that this company had a lot of qualified activities is we were able to take a significant number of supply costs. So that componentry that they were integrated to make a brand new system was what qualified as an expense toward their credit. Here's another example, a plastic injection company. Again, not a very large company, $4 million in gross revenue. But again, you know, when you look at that continuum, they started with engineering or estimating and engineering, and then they had to figure out the molds, the tooling, everything in order to produce that first article. And because those molds are used in the development of a first article, you can't make a first article without the testing of these molds. They're also considered a first article and eligible for the credit, for the expenses that go into the credit. Here's a cosmetic company. Again, a nice size company, 16 million in gross revenue. You can see, you know, this is formulation. That was one of the 6 business components. So not only do they have to formulate and develop in a laboratory setting, you know, what kinds of chemistry is going to go into that formulation, but then they make small batches and then they figure out how to scale it in a manufacturing process. Again, all of those steps qualify for the R&D tax credit. Here's another example of a valve manufacturer, about 20 million in gross revenue. This is another example where, you know, they had a whole product line. And so really they were responding to their clients' needs to say, you know, we need, and looking at the custom development of a certain number of valves that they could then integrate into their entire line. And so that was really the focus of the credit. And you can see they got almost $300,000 as opposed to the $30,000 that they were claiming. There was a lot of supply costs, a lot of tooling expenses, and a lot of wages throughout, particularly production wages. They were taking mostly just engineering. And so they were missing, you know, the beginning of estimating all the way through to the production. So they were missing quite a few expenses that they were eligible for. And here's the last one in this category. This is, you know, a chemical engineering manufacturing company. Again, very similar to food processing. They're looking at stabilization of different chemical compounds and the scalability of that. And so, you know, when they are going through that process, they got almost $500,000, and they weren't claiming the credit prior to being introduced to AlliantGroup. So that's, for manufacturing systems integrators. There's also a lot of qualifying activities for industrial controls and automation. As you can imagine, this is like controls and automation. Two things are driving this: the technical knowledge that is required in order to do the multidisciplinary engineering knowledge that's required to do controls and automation within a manufacturing facility, any sort of industrial application, any sort of wastewater application, what it takes to actually figure out how to either take existing extant systems, hardware that already exists, and incorporate automation into it, or whether you're developing and working on the development of a whole complete system and you are the specialist in the automation portion of it. All of that is, going to qualify regardless of the application. But this is a bullseye for the credit, and naturally you'll see this is an automation fabrication company. Again, a nice sized company, but to get $600,000 of credits. Now, mind you, these are tax credits. They are not a deduction. Depending on how you're structured, if you're structured as a C Corp or an S Corp, in an S Corp LLC, these are going to flow through to your K1, offset taxes at the individual level. So in that case, if I'm a 35% taxpayer, then this is worth about $2 million worth of income. So it's a dollar for dollar reduction in taxes owed or taxes paid, and these come in the form of refunds. Here's, again, this is astonishing, right? An $8 million automation engineering company that got over $1 million of credits. But again, if you think about what engineering automation firms do, their biggest overhead is going to be their technical talent, the multidiscipline engineers that they employ to solve these kind of custom solutions for a client. So we see this all the time. I know $1 million, it's a lot of money, but that allows these companies to be more innovative, to try new and different things. And certainly in the world of automation, it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. And so not only do you have to know how to apply all of these existing technologies and how to integrate it, but you also have to stay ahead of machine learning, AI, what's the latest and greatest that you're going to incorporate in order to make this system, reliable for the next 3, 4, 5 years until that technology becomes obsolete. And then here's one for food processors. We talked a little bit about food processing earlier, but this is an example, a very large company that got about $370,000 in credits. And naturally, they have a whole huge product line that they've developed over years. We just focused in on their new product development in a single year, and they were able to get this kind of result. So I know I'm close to being out of time. I just want to let you know that there have been substantial changes with the R&D credit over the past 4 years. If you had a study done years ago, you should look at it again. There's been so many expansions, and the credit is more valuable than ever, both under both Obama administration as well as the Trump administration. This credit has bipartisan support. It's permanent now. This is something you can count on years into the future. And we encourage you to get some more information, because especially these days, companies need money now more than ever. And this is a way to put more money in your pockets to help you either navigate these unusual times that we hope are going to be behind us, next year, but also a way to keep investing in equipment, technologies that are important to you in order to stay, on the leading edge of your industry. So I'm going to just, you know, I'm not going to go into our phases and how we go about our studies, Sandia, but I am going to, I know I'm a little bit over time here. I'm going to turn this back to your team. And let me see, I just need to, I'm going to end my slideshow here and let me turn the controls over.
Thank you. Thanks to Alliant for that great presentation and those excellent examples. Now that you have a better idea of the tools to pay for these cutting edge technologies and how that can happen, you know, more and more affordably, my colleague Kurt and I, we want to talk about a very specific tool. That's the collaborative robot from Universal Robots. So I'd like you to start by considering UR's vision statement, empowering people. People are at the core of our companies and we want them to thrive. And it benefits really everything about a business for that to happen. So the way collaborative technology fits into that vision is as a tool more than anything. A collaborative robot can do very impressive things, but it is best to think of it as a tool, just like a hammer or a screwdriver. But in this case, it happens to be programmable, and we use this word collaborative. So with the old style industrial robots, there can be a barrier for implementation from the large floor space that you see on the left to large amounts of external safety equipment, difficult outsourced programming often. The industrial robot cells are typically good at one or two things, and redeployment might not even be possible really. So for a collaborative robot, the collaborative term refers to a better way to make robotic automation accessible. If you can achieve these four criteria, all of a sudden, a robot becomes that much more realistic for your business. So cobots are safe to work besides humans, thanks to state-of-the-art technology that provides inherent safety. They're easy to program, much more intuitive than a traditional industrial robot. They're flexible. That means two things, actually. They can be easily tweaked to adjust to changes in the environment, and they can be redeployed. And finally, cobots are defined by the fast return on investment. So when we look at Universal Robots today, the growth, and especially the staff growth, is very significant. I want to highlight that. And I also want to highlight just the power of the ecosystem. So there's probably actually more like 1,000 companies that are certified to make compatible devices and software that can expand the available applications for cobots. And there are just as many distributors and integrators that are working to develop solutions. The power of UR really is in this open platform that makes them so widely available, so that if there's any gap in the market, some device that should be there that isn't, that people are wanting, it's a great opportunity for a go-getter company that can develop a device, and they're being added monthly. So if you look at the presence worldwide, UR has developed deployed over 46,000 cobots today, and they're by far the industry leader in collaborative robot sales worldwide. They have over half the market. You know, competitors in this cobot space are going to be a reality since collaborative technology is such a great concept. But UR is the innovator and the leader in the field. It's by far the most popular. So going back to the vision statement on empowering people, I want to reflect on the common beliefs that we have about humans. Humans have consciousness, and we're curious. We're built to grow and adapt, and that's how, you know, humans see the potential of the world. But when you look at the market, you see that labor is organized a lot of times as if people are machines. And there's also the 4 Ds. You see dull, dirty, dangerous, difficult jobs that are not well suited for people to do. And when you don't have the right role for people, if you're treating them like a machine, it's really impossible to keep them on that job. I mean, this is the real cause of attrition for all companies. On some tasks, that's just really unavoidable. No matter what you can do, it's just the task itself is going to cause that problem. So when we measure people like they're machines, we use uptime, availability, performance. These are a lot of terms that we use for machines. So that seems to cause a conflict there. And labor effectivity is really a continuation of machines because of the way that we've ingrained to think about it. So we're really missing the potential of humans. I mean, the result is with the numbers that about 72% of people are not engaged at work. This amounts to a 25% loss of productivity. And you can make that up maybe by hiring more disengaged people, but that's becoming really impossible to keep up with. And if you look closer at the 72% number, this not engaged group, about 19% are actively disengaged, and that's very concerning. So what we need to do is we want to think about how we can further engage our people, and the way to do that is to enable the full potential of our human labor. So another thing we can do along those lines is change the way we measure staff. So we can develop a balanced model. Most of us look at the easy to measure activity, like balanced scorecards, KPIs, sales dollars. Every company is doing that. What a lot of companies are missing are this hard to measure high impact activity, motivation and learning ability, and leadership. That is a great way that we can create active employees who are engaged. And if we want to care about the high impact to our companies, we need to be able to measure that. So measuring our high impacts is an essential part of our business, I think, for the future. And we know that flexibility will help us to adapt to changing markets. So as a lot of you probably know, these low-cost labor models have really run their course. If you have an annual contract with a customer and they're asking for better and better pricing each year, there's not much you can do on the labor side, especially with rising wages. So, and even beyond that, the labor shortage issue is not going away. Manufacturing labor is scarce, it's aging, and that's really been the main driver all along for automation, is that lack of labor. So bringing it back to collaborative robots, the market is also becoming more dynamic. The old way of automating with these fixed systems, or what we might call hard automated systems, isn't cutting it either. And we want to be able to adapt to changes in product and needs, and we want to shift existing equipment to new orders. So if you have one takeaway from this, I want it to be flexibility. One of the true critical success factors for companies going forward is going to be how well you can adapt to the unknowns. Flexibility, it drives all these things we know about, increases quality, speed, efficiency, and brings costs down. But for the collaborative technology, we can reduce floor space, reduce complexity, increase our flexibility, take that efficiency back into the process, increase the quality, increase the safety and ergonomics for people. And this is what cobots can do for you. It's how you can adapt to these times of fast changing circumstances. So with that, I want to pass it over to Kurt, and I'll have him go over kind of more what that looks like in terms of a practical checklist on how you can get these robots in. So let me make him the host here.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you to AlliantGroup. My name is Kurt Vaeth, as Justin and Sandia mentioned. Today I'm going to be going over 3 very important topics to cover before getting into the collaborative automation in your facility. The first is going to be how to identify a good application. Then we're going to look at, actually, you know what, I think I'm sharing, am I sharing the?
We see your slides just fine.
You do see the slides good? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Then we're going to look at how to implement that application. And after that, we're going to look at examples of applications and customers that have collected very attractive ROIs. So the best way to start with this would be a plant tour. And this is something that we at FPE can help with. While on that tour, I've listed out a few good identifiers to look for that will better define where to start with collaborative automation in your facility. These are going to include human tasks, and these human tasks are going to be typically very highly repetitive and coarse movements. By coarse movements, I mean any kind of movements that may require any additional core body strength or more strength, like moving boxes, holding torque and glue guns, stacking, packing, transferring of cases, etc. And these are the types of movements we want to target. We're also going to see fine movements on the floor. And these can be done, but it's just much more difficult to automate. Some of these movements are going to include fine dexterous assembly type applications, threading wire or cable, typing or tying your shoes, etc. We're also going to look for dull, dirty, and dangerous applications like Justin had mentioned. Anything under 36 pounds, low payload applications, and typically slower than 6 to 8 cycles per minute. We want to remember while we're looking that UR is built to replicate human tasks and not necessarily superhuman tasks. We're also going to look on the floor from a business-related standpoint. And it's important to focus on these areas to automate where turnover may be an issue, where temporary labor is a burden, if you're not meeting production goals, or quality and scrap is a concern. Both quality and scrap and production issues can kind of be related back to the temp labor portion of it. A lot of times when facilities are leveraging temporary labor, quality and scrap is of concern due to overall knowledge of the process from the high turnover, and production rates are often lacking due to attendance issues. Okay, so now that we've identified some potential projects where it makes sense from a business and application standpoint, I've got listed here an application audit table that can be a helpful tool to decide where to move forward with first. Now, this is just an example, but as you can see, there are 3 main categories listed. Number 1 is going to be implementation difficulty. 2 is estimated payback or ROI, and then 3 we have client pain. When deciding on difficulty, we typically want to look at what's all involved. Are we going to be interfacing with any kind of PLC or HMI? Is this a single cell application or multiple cells? And then is there any kind of additional process equipment, or are we interfacing with any type of ERP system? Those are going to kind of add some complexity to the application. And then we're going to look at ROI. Are we actually saving headcount in this application, or maybe increasing production or scrap reduction? Do we have any kind of overtime savings, or any type of, if we are leveraging temporary agencies, are we saving from that? Then we have client pain. And although this is something that we really want to be resolved, it may not be the best place to start, just depending on ROI and difficulty. We want to always start with the application that has the best chance for success, to have the quickest ROI and the easiest difficulty. So now that we have our application somewhat identified, it's time to decide how we're going to make this idea into a reality. And there are typically 3 buckets this falls into, and the first is customer DIY. So customer DIY, or the do-it-yourself customer, really consists of the customer procuring all the parts of the project from the distributor, and the customer is responsible for all design and implementation, and this typically includes the programming and handshaking of equipment. This is a little bit more typical on repeat systems, but we've been seeing a big shift in the do-it-yourself customer due to some of the things that Justin mentioned, like the UR ecosystem, and some of the application toolkits that come with or that are available to you online. And a lot of the online training resources as well that are made available for free on the Universal Robots website. And not to mention that we have certified training facilities in both our FPE North and South office that can offer core trainings to get you up and running quickly. Then lastly, we have, you must have a product champion assigned in the company. If there's not someone dedicated to these projects full-time, they'll typically get put to the wayside, and that person's going to get pulled aside to do their full-time job, and this project's lead time is going to keep getting extended and extended. The second bucket is installation or engineering services with the distributor involved. And really a majority of universal robot applications fall within this realm. It's when the customer wants to take on responsibility of partially doing the project and being involved in the setup and installation, but they still want an expert that's hired to come in and help and assist with various stages or steps of the project. This could be anything from like outsourcing custom InDesign, end-of-arm tooling, programming, or even safety risk assessments. It's more of like a paying or piecemealing service a la carte style. And this process will also help keep the costs low and still help the customer realize a quick deployment. And the good thing is too, it allows the customer to be more capable for any future installations. And the third and final bucket is the one that most clients are probably used to. And this is how a lot of larger automation projects are deployed. It's a full turnkey automation system. And this is a system that's ready to go as soon as it's delivered to your facility. Going with this type of system could potentially increase cost due to increased overhead from the integrator, and it could add length to the timeline, just depending on how busy the integrator is at that period in time. So now it's decision time. If you are an end user, it's time for you to decide the best approach for your project, for your company, based on your team. And we believe that choosing the integration model is really a business decision driven by these 4 key factors I have listed here. So the first is project urgency, and some of the main drivers of this could be labor shortage, savings, machine utilization, customer account control, or customer orders and overall project timeline. Then we have in-house resources. Like I mentioned earlier, what are your resources in-house? Can you afford to assign a project champion to this project full-time? Do your resources have any automation experience or any other specialized training, such as maybe safety protocols or risk assessments? And then we have project scope, and this one's extremely important to define before determining what level of integration is most important. And I had briefly mentioned this earlier when going over the audit implementation difficulty portion, and when talking about whether this is single or multiple cells, or we're going to be interfacing with any other equipment. But we also try to look at 4 other criteria here, and I'm going to list them off to help you decide the best place to start. Is the application going to require greater than 70% of the rated payload of the robot? Is it going to require greater than 70% of the rated speed? Is it going to require greater than 70% of the max work envelope, or greater than 70% of the stated repeatability? Every one of these is a very large risk factor, and if you check off 1 or more, it's a pretty good indicator that you may need more experienced parties involved to carefully manage this project. And then finally, of project risk. What's the impact to your company for missed installation startup schedules? What may be the impact for missing throughput or production goals? And then what's the impact for missing quality or objective goals? And finally, what's the impact for overspending on the budget? Is there flexibility for that, or is there room in the ROI for that? So speaking of ROI, now that we've taken a look at your plant floor, selected where we want to start based on the audit table, and have an idea on how to start, whether it's DIY, installation, or integration, let's look at some examples of quick wins and fast payback. So UR typically has the fastest payback in the industry of around 10 to 14 months. And here are some examples here. So these are average payback times listed by application. And really, this all is going to depend on some of the criteria that I had mentioned earlier about project urgency, risk, and scope. But as you can see, quality inspection here is one of the lowest with around 4 months. And then you have CNC machine tending at around 8 months. And everything else falls between that 10 and 14 month timeline. So the fastest payback we have on record is actually task force tips. And they have around a 34-day payback with 2 UR tennies. And these robots are CNC machine tending together for about 21 hours a day unassisted. And this allowed the task force tips to free up more than half of the staff to work on more value-added production tasks. There's a number of other case studies online on Universal Robots' website, but I just want to list a couple more, like Dynamic Group in Minneapolis, Minnesota. ROI of 2 months, injection molding, tending, degating, and kitting, and they quadrupled production, and they have multiple amount of robots on their floor. And then Paradigm Electronics had around a 12 to 14 month ROI doing surface polishing of speakers using the force torque sensor on the end of the arm tool. And that was about a 50% production increase on that application. So I know we went over a lot of information today, and please feel free to reach out to your local FPE sales professional for questions or any help with the discussed information. If you need help on trying to figure out ROI or anything like that, feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to help. Thanks again to everybody for joining the webinar today, and we really look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kurt. That was excellent. And we do have our first question. It rolled in just recently. It's for Tracy. It says, Tracy, is the R&D tax credit a one-time, one-year credit, or can you take it every tax year?
This is a great question. Thanks, Sandia and Josh. You have 3 open tax years that you can go back and get refunds from taxes overpaid. Also, most of our clients, will have variables. They'll have some years that they're paying taxes, some years that they aren't. So the credits carry back 1 year and forward 20. So, we never look at just 1 year for a client. We want to look at their full picture and understand all the tax that they paid over that 4-year period, or what they have coming up in terms of payments, and be able to evaluate how much in credits we can qualify for them, and then figure out our scope, because we're just trying to hit that sweet spot of their tax need. So you may not need all 4 years, you may only need 3 of 4, 2 of 4, or you may need all 4. But the credit's also permanent. So not only is it available to you from, and we're always chasing statutes. So 2016 may likely be expired or expiring for you. So I would urge you to seek information right away. But even 17, 18, 19 is available. And then of course your 2020 year. And then forward into the future, 21, 22, 23. It's a permanent credit.
Excellent. We'll just give everyone a minute because I know it takes a second or two to type in your questions. Are there any additional questions for any member of the team? And in the meantime, if any of the other panel of experts would like to add anything, please feel free. Well, I'm not getting additional questions. I'm hoping that if you didn't get an opportunity to ask a question or you need additional information, you can feel free, of course, to reach out to any one of us, Tracy from AlliantGroup, and also FPE Automation, Justin and Kurt you heard from today. A good place to start is our General Automation Controls email address. That is acd@fpeautomation.com. So that would be like A as in Apple, C as in Charlie, D as in David, at fpeautomation.com. You can certainly start there if you missed anything today or would like to ask questions, and we can forward those to Tracy as well. I would like to thank everyone at this point, since I don't see additional questions coming in, for attending today. We had a full presentation, a lot of information, and we hope to be hearing from you soon. With that, everyone be well, and we'll go ahead and sign off. And until next time, take care, everyone.